A confident flight instructor mocks a black woman on her first day at an elite aviation academy, dismissing her dreams with cruel assumptions. He doesn't know she's a decorated Air Force pilot with thousands of combat hours, and his boss is about to walk through that door. The hangar smelled of jet fuel and ambition. Morning light sliced through the massive windows of Apex Aviation Academy, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floor. Captain Maya Torres stood perfectly still, her ivory flight suit crisp against her dark skin, her posture military precise. Instructor Derek Hayes circled her like a predator assessing prey. His Royal Blue Academy jacket bore 20 years of service patches. His eyes held something else entirely, doubt wrapped in a smirk. "So," Hayes said, his voice carrying across the hangar where other instructors pretended not to watch. "First day jitters?" Maya's hands remained at her sides. "No, sir." "Ready to begin?" Hayes laughed, a sharp bark that echoed off the metal walls. "Confidence. I like that." He didn't sound like he liked it. He sounded like he was already writing her off. "Tell me something, Torres. What makes you think you belong here?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Other instructors shifted uncomfortably. A few students near the door froze mid-conversation. Maya felt the weight of every eye in the room, the familiar pressure of being judged before she'd even touched a throttle. "My qualifications, sir," Maya said simply. Hayes picked up a clipboard from the nearby workbench. He didn't look at it. "Qualifications on paper don't mean much up there." He gestured toward the ceiling, toward the sky beyond. "This isn't some diversity checkbox program. This is real aviation. Lives depend on what we teach." Maya's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Her father's voice whispered in her memory, "Stay calm. Let your flying speak. I understand, sir. Do you?" Hayes stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost conversational, almost kind. It made the words cut deeper. "Because I've seen a lot of people walk through that door thinking they've earned something. The sky doesn't care about your story. It only cares if you can fly." Maya met his gaze directly. "Then let me fly, sir. Hey, where are you from? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories." 3 weeks earlier, Maya had stood in her daughter's bedroom in Colorado Springs, holding the acceptance letter from Apex Aviation Academy. Zoe, 7 years old with braids tied in gold ribbons, had hugged her legs tight. "You're going to teach people to fly like you, Mama? Just like me, baby." Zoe had pulled back, her face serious in that way children get when they're trying to understand the adult world. "Will they listen?" The question had lodged itself in Maya's chest. Will they listen? She'd earned her wings through blood, sweat, and 15 years of proving herself in cockpits where hesitation meant death. She'd flown combat missions over territories whose names were still classified. She'd brought her aircraft home with systems failing, with warning lights screaming, with nothing but skill and nerve keeping metal in the sky. Now she was here to teach, to pass forward what she'd learned, to be the instructor she'd never had, someone who looked like her, who understood what it meant to fight twice as hard for half the recognition. Apex Aviation Academy rose from the Colorado landscape like a monument to excellence. Glass and steel structures gleamed in the mountain sunlight. The runways stretched endlessly, perfect black strips against brown earth. Inside, everything spoke of prestige. Leather chairs in the briefing rooms, state-of-the-art simulators, walls covered with photographs of legendary pilots. Maya had walked those halls her first morning, her boots echoing on polished floors. She'd felt the stares, the subtle double-takes. A black woman in a flight instructor's uniform wasn't common here. The photos on the walls told that story clearly. Decades of white faces, confident smiles, hands-on aircraft they'd mastered. She'd found the instructor lounge and introduced herself professionally. Some colleagues had been welcoming. Others had offered tight smiles and quick excuses to be elsewhere. Hayes had been in the latter category, barely glancing up from his coffee before mumbling something about a briefing. Maya had learned long ago to read rooms, to sense the currents beneath polite surfaces. This place had undercurrents. She'd navigated worse. She'd survived worse. Her locker held a single photograph, Zoe grinning gap-toothed in front of an F-16. This is why, Maya reminded herself. For every little girl who needs to see someone who looks like her touching the sky. She'd unpacked her flight bag with the same precision she brought to everything. Checklist completed. Gear inspected, mind focused. Tomorrow she'd prove herself all over again. Tomorrow the real work began. The simulator bay stretched the length of a football field. 12 flight simulators lined the walls, each one a technological marvel worth more than most houses. Instructors claimed their stations like territories, settling into the newest models with practiced ease. Hayes led Maya past them all. Past the Boeing 787 simulator with its wraparound displays. Past the Airbus A350 with motion feedback so realistic pilots forgot they were on the ground. Past everything modern and functional. He stopped at Simulator 12, tucked in the corner like forgotten furniture. The equipment was older, the screens dimmer. Duct tape held one of the seat covers together. Maya recognized the model. It had been outdated when she was still in flight school. "This is yours," Hayes announced. "Get familiar with it. You'll be running your first student session tomorrow." Maya examined the controls. Half the instruments looked non-functional. "Sir, is this unit fully operational?" "Operational enough." Hayes checked his watch impatiently. "Look, Torres, everyone starts somewhere. You work your way up to the better equipment. That's how it works here." Across the bay, a young white male instructor, fresh-faced, couldn't be more than 25, settled into Simulator 3, one of the newest units. He'd arrived the same day as Maya. She'd seen his resume in the break room. Commercial license, 800 flight hours, no military experience. "Sir, I don't think," Maya began. "You don't think what?" Hayes cut her off, his voice sharp enough to turn heads. "You think you deserve special treatment on day one? You think the rules don't apply to you?" The simulator bay went quiet. Conversations died mid-sentence. Other instructors found sudden interest in their clipboards. Students in the observation area exchanged glances. Maya felt the familiar heat rising in her chest, the anger she'd learned to compress into something cold and controlled. She'd stood before commanding officers who'd doubted her. She'd faced hostile pilots who'd questioned her right to wear the uniform. She knew this game. "No, sir," she said evenly. "I just want to ensure my students receive quality instruction." Hayes smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Then I'm sure you'll make it work. Good instructors adapt. Great ones overcome obstacles." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Torres, try not to break anything. These old units are temperamental." He walked away, boots clicking on concrete, leaving Maya standing beside equipment that belonged in a museum. She climbed into the simulator, her hands finding controls worn smooth by decades of use. The seat creaked. A warning light flickered without cause. Behind her she heard whispers, smothered laughter, the sound of judgment passing between people who'd already decided she didn't belong. Maya closed her eyes and breathed. One day, she told herself, just get through one day. The women's locker room was empty when Maya finally escaped there during lunch break. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in harsh white glare. She sat on the wooden bench, still in her flight suit, and let her shoulders drop for the first time all morning. Her reflection stared back from the mirror across the room. She looked tired, older than 38. Her father's eyes looked out from her face, determined, unwavering, carrying generations of proof that belonging was something you took, not something granted. What makes you think you belong here? Hayes's question circled in her mind like a vulture. She'd heard versions of it her entire career, at the academy when she'd been one of 3 black women in her class. During her first deployment, when a crew chief had asked if she was lost. After earning her wings when a fellow pilot had suggested she'd received them to fill a quota. Every time she'd answered the same way, with excellence so undeniable it silenced doubt. with performance that turned skeptics into believers, with hours logged and missions completed, and aircraft brought home safe when others said it couldn't be done. But God, she was tired of proving it. Her hands remembered things her mind tried to forget. The stick of an F-16 during a sandstorm over hostile territory, the throttle response of a damaged aircraft limping toward friendly airspace, the sensation of G-forces compressing her spine as she pulled hard turns to evade surface-to-air missiles. She'd earned every call sign, every commendation, every promotion. Her logbook was a testament written in flight hours and aircraft types and missions completed under impossible conditions. She wasn't here because someone felt sorry for her. She was here because she was one of the best pilots in the country, so why did it still feel like she was starting from zero? Maya pulled her father's wings from her pocket, the silver pin he'd given her the day she'd earned her own. He'd been so proud, his voice cracking as he'd pressed them into her palm. "How you did what I never could," he'd said. "You made them see you." She closed her fingers around the cool metal. "No," she thought. "I made myself impossible to ignore. There's a difference." The locker room door opened. Maya quickly wiped her eyes and stood, shoulders back, face composed. Another instructor entered, offered a brief nod, and disappeared into the bathroom. The moment of vulnerability was over. The armor went back on. Maya checked her watch. 15 minutes until her next session. 15 minutes to transform exhaustion into excellence. She'd done it 1,000 times before. She could do it again. She tucked her father's wings back into her pocket and headed for the door. 20 years ago, Maya had stood on a different tarmac under a different sky. 17 years old, skinny, terrified, and absolutely certain she was meant to fly. Her father had driven her to the Air Force Academy, his hands tight on the steering wheel, his jaw working like he was chewing words he couldn't quite say. They'd sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes after arriving. Around them, other families were unloading cars, taking photos, crying theatrical goodbyes. Her father had just stared at the mountains rising beyond the campus. "My daddy," he'd finally said, "was the son of a Tuskegee airman. You know that story." Maya had nodded. She'd grown up with that story, with the black and white photographs of her great-grandfather standing beside his P-51 Mustang, one of the legendary pilots who'd proved that black men could fly combat missions as well as anyone. "Better than most." He never talked much about the war, her father had continued, but he talked about after, about coming home to a country that still wouldn't serve him at lunch counters, about how the respect ended the moment he took off the uniform. He turned to look at her then, his eyes bright with something between pride and fear. "He taught me that excellence isn't enough. You have to be excellent and visible. You have to fly so well they can't look away." He'd reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. Inside were his father's wings. Original issue, tarnished with age, but still gleaming. "These belonged to a man who flew when people said he couldn't," her father had said, pressing them into her palm. "Now they belong to you. Fly like they can't ignore you, baby girl. Fly like the sky is yours by right." Maya had carried those wings through everything that followed, through the academy's grueling training where she'd outperformed men twice her size, through flight school where instructors had watched her extra closely, waiting for a mistake that never came, through her first combat deployment, where she'd flown 73 missions without incident. She'd earned her call sign, Steady, during a mission that had gone sideways fast. Engine failure over enemy territory, hostile fire tracking her damaged aircraft, radio communications down. She'd glided that dying plane 40 miles to a secure landing zone, touching down with fuel reserves measured in seconds. Her wingman had radioed afterward, "Steadiest flying I've ever seen under fire." The name had stuck. Steady Torres. The pilot, who never panicked, never wavered, never gave anyone reason to doubt her capability. But steady didn't mean fearless. It meant afraid and flying anyway. It meant swallowing the anger when people assumed she was a mechanic, not a pilot. It meant smiling through the condescension, the microaggressions, the invisible barriers that only people who'd never faced them could afford to ignore. She'd left active duty after 15 years for Zoe. Her daughter deserved a mother who came home every night, who wasn't deployed to classified locations for months at a time. Teaching had seemed like the natural next step, passing forward what she'd learned, shaping the next generation of pilots. She'd imagined respect waiting for her here. She'd imagined her credentials speaking for themselves. She'd been wrong. The instructor lounge was empty at 7 p.m. Most staff had gone home to families, to dinners, to lives outside these walls. Maya had stayed late, familiarizing herself with curriculum guides and safety protocols. She needed coffee before the drive home. The lounge was comfortable in a deliberately masculine way. Leather chairs, a wall-mounted television playing sports, highlights on mute, a coffee station that had seen better days. Maya was refilling her mug when she heard voices from the adjacent office, Hayes's office. The door was cracked open, light spilling through. "I'm telling you, it's getting ridiculous," Hayes was saying. "They keep pushing these diversity hires on us, and we're supposed to just smile and nod." Another voice, male, younger, responded with nervous laughter. "What do you mean?" Torres, the new instructor. "Look, I'm not saying she can't fly. I'm saying there's a difference between checking boxes and actual qualification. Half these, people get pushed through because of their skin color or their gender, and suddenly we're supposed to pretend standards haven't changed." Maya froze, the coffee mug burning her palm. She should leave. She should walk away. She should not be hearing this, but her feet wouldn't move. She seemed pretty professional, the younger voice ventured. "They always do at first," Hayes said dismissively. "But when it comes down to it, when you're in the cockpit with lives on the line, that's when the cracks show. That's when you find out who actually earned their wings and who was given them to fill a quota." Papers rustled. Maya edged closer to the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Her file is right here," Hayes continued. "I haven't bothered reading it, don't need to. I've seen enough diversity hires to know the pattern. Decent enough on paper, but can't handle the real pressure. Give her 6 months, she'll wash out or transfer somewhere less demanding." 6 months? That's... "Trust me," Hayes cut him off. "I've been doing this 20 years. You develop instincts about people. She doesn't have what it takes. And honestly, it's not her fault. The system failed her by pushing her into a role she's not ready for. I'm just being realistic." Maya's hand trembled, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Her father's wings pressed against her chest pocket, a familiar weight that suddenly felt heavy as lead. Hayes's credentials file sat on his desk. She could see it through the crack in the door, a manila folder with her name typed on the tab. Unopened. Unread. Judged without examination. She pulled out her phone and took 3 photos through the gap. The folder, the angle showing it had never been opened. The timestamp on her phone proving when this discovery happened. Evidence. Because she'd learned long ago that in rooms where your word wasn't enough, you needed proof. The voices continued, but Maya was already backing away, her coffee forgotten on the counter. She walked out of the lounge on legs that felt disconnected from her body, down the empty hallway, where her footsteps echoed too loud, past windows showing the dark runway beyond. In her car, she sat for 15 minutes, gripping the steering wheel and breathing through the rage. Not surprise, she'd felt this particular knife before, but rage at the casualness of it, the lazy assumption, the dismissal without examination. He hasn't even read my file. All day she'd been trying to prove herself to a man who'd already decided she was unworthy. All day she'd been fighting a battle that had been lost before she'd entered the ring. Maya pulled up the photos on her phone. Clear. Undeniable. Time stamped. She started the engine and drove home through darkness, her mind already calculating the next move. Maya arrived early the next morning with a plan forming like storm clouds. She'd barely slept, her mind running through scenarios, calculating risks, weighing consequences. But one truth remained constant. Hayes was in the briefing room when she found him, coffee in hand, reviewing flight schedules. He looked up with barely concealed irritation. "Torres, something you need?" "I'd like to request a formal evaluation flight, sir." Hayes set down his coffee slowly. "Evaluation flight? You just started." "I understand, sir. But I'd like to demonstrate my capabilities in a practical setting. Standard protocol allows instructors to request evaluations within their first 30 days. Other instructors were filtering in for the morning briefing. Conversations quieted as they sensed tension brewing. Hayes's jaw tightened, but his smile remained fixed, the smile of someone who believed he held all the cards. "You sure about that, Torres?" "Evaluation flights aren't casual joyrides. We use advanced scenarios, high-stress situations. Most new instructors wait months before requesting one." "I'm sure, sir." Hayes leaned back, arms crossed. "All right, then. Tomorrow morning, 0700. I'll personally conduct your evaluation." His tone suggested he was doing her a favor, while simultaneously looking forward to watching her fail. "We'll use scenario Delta 7. You familiar with it?" Maya's stomach dropped. Delta 7 was legendary among aviation instructors, a multi-layered emergency scenario designed to push experienced pilots to their limits. Dual engine failure, hydraulic system compromise, severe weather conditions, all at low altitude. The washout rate was 60%. "I'll review the parameters tonight, sir." "Good." Hayes stood, gathering his materials. "Tomorrow we'll see what you're really made of, Torres. No more hiding behind paperwork and protocol. Just you, the aircraft, and the sky." He paused at the door, his voice carrying to everyone in the room. "May the best pilot win." The room remained silent after he left. Maya felt eyes on her. Some sympathetic, others curious, a few openly skeptical. She just painted a target on her own back, challenged the senior instructor, put everything on the line. Her hands were steady as she reached for her flight bag. "Good," she thought. "Let him think he's already won." The evaluation aircraft was a Cessna Citation X, sleek, powerful, unforgiving of mistakes. Maya completed her pre-flight inspection with methodical precision, checking every system, every control surface, every instrument. Hayes watched from the hangar, arms crossed, surrounded by other instructors who'd found reasons to be present for this particular flight. They took off at dawn, the Colorado landscape spreading beneath them in shades of gold and shadow. For the first 20 minutes, Hayes ran standard maneuvers, steep turns, stall recovery, navigation procedures. Maya executed each one flawlessly, her movements economical and precise. "Not bad," Hayes admitted grudgingly. "Let's see how you handle pressure." Initiating Delta 7 scenario. The cockpit exploded with warning alarms. Engine fire light on engine 1. Hydraulic pressure dropping. Weather radar showing severe turbulence ahead. Altitude 8,000 feet and falling. Every screen screamed emergency. Maya's training took over. Her hands moved without conscious thought. Mixture controls adjusted. Fuel cutoff activated. Emergency procedures executed in perfect sequence. She'd lived this scenario dozens of times in combat, where the consequences were measured in lives instead of evaluation scores. "Engine 2 failure," Hayes announced, killing the second engine. "You're gliding. Nearest airport is 20 miles northeast. What's your move?" Maya's eyes scanned the instruments, calculating glide ratio, wind speed, distance remaining. Her mind was ice-cold, crystalline. She'd brought damaged aircraft home across hostile deserts. This was just another Tuesday. She banked toward the emergency airfield, adjusting trim, managing energy, every decision building on the last. The aircraft responded like an extension of her will. Altitude 4,000 feet, 3,000, 2,000. Hayes said nothing. His silence was louder than the alarms. Maya touched down on the emergency runway with a precision that made it look easy. The landing was textbook perfect, centered, smooth, controlled. She brought the aircraft to a complete stop and shut down systems methodically. The cockpit fell silent except for their breathing. Hayes sat motionless, staring at the instruments. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight. "Wait here." He climbed out of the aircraft and walked toward the operations building without looking back. Maya watched him go, her heart finally allowing itself to race. Through the window, she saw him pull out his phone, gesturing animatedly as he spoke to someone. 20 minutes passed. 30. Maya sat alone in the cockpit, the morning sun growing warmer, doubt beginning to creep through her confidence. What was happening? Had she done something wrong? Had Hayes found a technicality, some minor error to disqualify her performance? Her phone buzzed. Our text from the Academy's administrative office. Report to Director Morrison's office immediately upon return. Maya's hands went cold. The flight back was silent. Hayes flew, his jaw clenched, saying nothing. Maya sat in the co-pilot seat, feeling the weight of the unknown pressing down like G-forces. Director Morrison wanted to see her immediately. That could mean anything, or it could mean everything was about to collapse. The Academy felt different when they landed, colder. The curious stares from earlier had transformed into something else, whispers behind hands, eyes that slid away when she looked directly at them. Word had spread. But word of what? Maya walked toward the administration building alone. Her footsteps echoed in hallways that suddenly felt endless. Through windows she saw other instructors teaching, students laughing, life continuing normally for everyone except her. She thought about Zoe, about the photo, in her locker of her daughter, standing proudly beside an F-16, about what she'd tell her. Daughter, if this all fell apart. I tried, baby. I spoke up. I stood tall. Sometimes that's not enough. Her father's wings pressed against her chest. She touched them through her flight suit, drawing strength from metal that had survived wars and decades, and the weight of generational dreams. Fly like they can't ignore you. But what if they could? What if excellence wasn't enough, had never been enough, would never be enough for people determined not to see? Maya stood outside Director Morrison's office, hand raised to knock, frozen in the moment between hope and devastation. She could hear voices inside, Morrison's deep rumble, Hayes's defensive tenor. Someone else she couldn't identify. She knocked. "Come in." The office was spacious, filled with afternoon light and aviation memorabilia. Director Morrison sat behind a massive desk, a white-haired man whose 60 years had been lived mostly in cockpits. Hayes stood by the window, arms crossed. A woman Maya didn't recognize sat in the corner with a tablet. "Captain Torres," Morrison said. His expression was unreadable. "Please sit down. We need to talk about your evaluation flight." Maya sat back straight, hands folded in her lap. Whatever was coming, she would face it with dignity. Morrison opened a file on his desk. Instructor Hayes filed an incident report regarding your evaluation. He claims you performed adequately. The word landed like a stone. However, he's raised concerns about your training background and whether you're properly certified to instruct at this level. Maya's heart hammered. "Sir, I'm happy to provide my complete flight records." "That won't be necessary," Morrison interrupted, "because I've already reviewed them." He turned his laptop screen toward her. There, displayed in crisp detail, was her entire military service record. Every mission, every commendation, every flight hour logged over 15 years of active duty. "You see, Captain Torres, something interesting happened after your evaluation flight. Instructor Hayes called me personally, very concerned about your qualifications, so I did what any responsible director would do. I pulled your complete file." Morrison leaned back. "The file that apparently Instructor Hayes never bothered to read before forming his opinions about you." Hayes's face had gone pale. Morrison continued, his voice gaining an edge. I'm looking at 3,000 flight hours, Distinguished Flying Cross, 73 combat missions, aircraft commander qualification in multiple airframes including the F-16 Fighting Falcon, instructor pilot certification, Top Gun graduate. He looked up. Tell me, Instructor Hayes, did any of this information factor into your assessment of Captain Torres's capabilities? Sir, because according to your initial notes, made on Captain Torres's first day before she'd flown a single hour under your supervision, you'd already determined she was a probable washout and a diversity placement. Morrison's voice was cold now. Would you like to explain those assessments to me? The office went silent. The woman in the corner was typing rapidly on her tablet. Maya realized she was from Human Resources. Hayes's mouth opened and closed. Sir, I've seen instructors before who looked good on paper, but you're telling me that a combat veteran with more flight hours than half this staff combined looked good on paper? Morrison stood. Captain Torres just executed a Delta 7 scenario flawlessly. You know how many instructors can do? Maya felt something loosening in her chest, a pressure she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Morrison turned to her. Captain Torres, I owe you an apology. You came to this academy with credentials that should have commanded immediate respect. Instead, you were assigned failing equipment, dismissed without evaluation, and subjected to treatment that frankly disgusts me. He pulled out another file. These are photos you took 2 nights ago, of your credentials file unopened on Instructor Hayes's desk, along with timestamps proving he never reviewed your qualifications before making assessments about your abilities. Hayes looked like he'd been struck. How did you... Captain Torres submitted them to HR this morning, along with a formal complaint, not about the evaluation, about a pattern of discriminatory behavior that started the moment she walked through our doors. Morrison pressed a button on his phone. Please send them in. The office door opened. 3 people entered. 2 Academy board members and the Equal Opportunity Officer. This wasn't just a meeting anymore. This was an investigation. Gentlemen, Ms. Rodriguez, Morrison addressed them. Thank you for coming on short notice. We have a situation that requires immediate board attention. He activated the conference room display. Maya's credentials appeared. Slide after slide of achievement, service, excellence documented across 15 years. Combat footage from her missions, grainy but undeniable. Her aircraft bringing home damaged planes. Commendations signed by generals. Student evaluations from her previous teaching positions, all exemplary. This, Morrison said, is Captain Maya Torres. This is who walked through our doors 1 week ago. He clicked to another slide. Hayes's notes from Maya's file, never opened but somehow annotated. Diversity hire. Probable washout. Check with admin about quota requirements. The dates were all from her first day, before he'd seen her fly, before he'd read her qualifications, before he'd given her any chance to demonstrate competence. And this, Morrison continued, is how she was received. The room felt heavy with judgment. Hayes stood frozen, his face cycling through emotions. Denial, anger, fear, realization. One board member, a stern woman in her 50s, spoke first. Instructor Hayes, did you read Captain Torres's credentials before making these assessments? No, ma'am. But my experience... Your experience told you that a woman of color couldn't possibly be qualified. Your experience suggested that her presence was political, rather than meritorious. The board member's voice was ice. Help me understand what experience teaches those lessons. Hayes had no answer. The Equal Opportunity Officer leaned forward. Captain Torres, you've submitted a formal complaint. Would you like to speak to the incidents you've experienced here? Maya took a breath. This was the moment. She could downplay it, minimize it, protect herself from being labeled as difficult. Or she could tell the truth. She chose truth. I came here to teach, Maya said quietly. I came here because I believe in passing forward knowledge, in shaping the next generation of pilots. in making sure that students who look like me can see someone who looks like them achieving at the highest levels. Her voice grew stronger. Instead, I was assigned equipment that doesn't work. I was dismissed before I spoke a word. I was assumed to be unqualified despite credentials that exceed most of this staff. And I was told to my face that the sky doesn't care about my story, only whether I can fly. She looked at Hayes directly. You're right about that, sir. The sky doesn't care. It doesn't care what color I am, what gender I am, what assumptions you've made about me. It only cares about skill. And I have spent 15 years proving my skill in environments where mistakes mean death. Not just failed evaluations. The room was absolutely silent. I didn't come here to cause trouble, Maya continued. I came here to teach. But I won't be silent when I'm treated as less than because of who I am rather than what I've achieved. I won't model that silence for students who need to see someone stand up. And I won't let my daughter grow up thinking that excellence doesn't matter if it comes in the wrong package. She stood, hands steady, voice clear. I love aviation. I love teaching. I love this profession, but this profession has to love me back. It has to see me. All of me, not just the parts that make you comfortable. Morrison nodded slowly. Thank you, Captain Torres. Your courage in speaking up likely prevented this pattern from continuing with other instructors. He turned to Hayes. Instructor Hayes, you're suspended pending a full investigation. You'll surrender your academy credentials immediately. Hayes's face crumbled. Sir, please. 20 years. 20 years during which you've apparently felt entitled to judge people without evidence, sir, Morrison said flatly. We'll be reviewing your entire history here. Every evaluation you've conducted, every instructor you've supervised. If this pattern extends beyond Captain Torres, the consequences will be severe. 2 weeks later, Maya stood in front of her first official class as lead flight instructor. The promotion had come swiftly once the investigation concluded. Hayes had resigned rather than face termination, and the board had fast-tracked Maya's advancement. The classroom held 30 students, their faces a beautiful mix of backgrounds and experiences. 3 young women of color sat in the front row, their eyes bright with something Maya recognized, hope mixed with determination, the look of people who'd been told they didn't belong but were here anyway. Good morning, Maya said. I'm Captain Torres. Before we begin, I want to tell you something my father told me when I was 17 and terrified of failing. She pulled out her great-grandfather's wings, holding them up so the silver caught the morning light. These belonged to a Tuskegee airman. He flew when people said he couldn't, when the country he served wouldn't serve him at lunch counters, when respect ended the moment he took off the uniform. Maya walked down the aisle, making eye contact with each student. He taught my father, who taught me, that excellence isn't enough. You have to be excellent and visible. You have to fly so well they can't look away. She stopped at the front row looking at the 3 young women. But I'm here to tell you something he couldn't. You shouldn't have to fly twice as well to be seen as half as good. You shouldn't have to prove yourself endlessly, while others are given the benefit of doubt. And you damn sure shouldn't have to be silent about injustice. The room was absolutely focused. This profession is changing, Maya continued. It's changing because people like you are here demanding space, refusing to be invisible. It's changing because excellence combined with courage is unstoppable. It's changing because the sky belongs to anyone willing to master it, not just those who've traditionally been welcomed. She returned to the front of the room. So here's how this class works. You will be evaluated on one thing only: your ability to safely operate aircraft and teach others to do the same, not on who you are, where you come from, or what I assume about you. Just on skill, knowledge, and dedication. Maya smiled, and it was genuine. Now let's get to work. The sky is waiting, and it doesn't care about anything except whether you can fly. That evening, Maya sat in her car outside the academy, watching the sun set over the runways. Orange and gold light painted the mountains beyond. Aircraft were parked in neat rows, waiting for tomorrow's students, tomorrow's lessons, tomorrow's pilots who would carry aviation forward. Her phone buzzed. A photo from Zoe, her daughter wearing Maya's old flight jacket, arms spread wide like wings, grinning at the camera. The text read, "Flying like you, Mama." Maya saved the photo and closed her eyes. She thought about her great-grandfather, who'd flown when it should have been impossible. About her father, who'd carried those wings forward even though his own dream had been deferred. About every person who'd pushed doors open so others could walk through. Excellence had never been the question. She'd always been excellent. The question was whether the world would finally see it, acknowledge it, make space for it. Today they had, not because she'd stayed quiet, not because she'd made herself smaller, but because she'd stood tall, spoken truth, and refused to let assumptions define her worth. The sky had always been hers. She'd just forced everyone else to finally recognize it. Maya tucked her father's wings back into her pocket, started the engine, and drove home through the gathering darkness. Tomorrow she'd teach 30 students to fly. Some of them would see her and realize their own dreams were possible. Some would learn that excellence comes in every color, every gender, every background, and somewhere, a 7-year-old girl with gold ribbons in her braids would grow up knowing that her mother didn't just touch the sky. She owned it. The lesson was simple. Written in contrails and courage, you don't need permission to be excellent. You just need to fly so well that gravity itself bends to your will. And when others try to ground you with their limitations, you climb higher, fly farther, and prove that the sky has room for everyone who refuses to be anything less than extraordinary. Excellence doesn't ask for permission. It demands recognition. And when the world finally looks up, they'll see you've been soaring all along.